this life is quite a gift, but in the end, it is just a game. It's a play. It's momentary. It doesn't. It's not forever, and the suffering that we experience is necessary for our spiritual growth. Hi, I'm Zach, and I had a near-death experience or an out-of-body experience when I was 14 years old in the early morning time, and then my spine had collapsed. The vertebrae had fractured, and so the bones of the spine, the lower three in the lumbar spine, they had collapsed, giving me pain, and so I had to go to a um, kind of like a bracing. I don't even know how you would say that, a bracing, and I started getting fuzzy headed, uh, starting to see little black dots everywhere and feeling quite weak. I started to walk out of the building with my father and my brother, and my dad and this man had known each other through music, so they were just talking about music and things like that in the area that I live in. But I was rushing pretty quickly to get to his truck because I felt like I was going to pass out. And I sat there and bent over on my thighs with my elbows and just kind of rested. And my dad was about 40 meters away, and I looked at him, and the whole time I was walking until I got to sitting, my vision just kept narrowing, 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 narrowing. And then I looked at my dad and I said, "Dad, I'm going to pass." And as I was about to say pass out, everything went black. And immediately it was like going from black to bright, luminescent, white, goldish, silver. It was just this, I don't know, this flowing white, gold, silvery color, and it was like felt like a tunnel. And so I kind of looked around and was just enamored by the feeling of that the light was almost contained like a feeling of love and a feeling of peace and a feeling of joy. And yeah, and it was almost like the light was a fluid, like a liquid love that was moving around me and through me. And it really wasn't that separate from me. And I was just enamored in that space. And then I looked forward and I saw a man in what I now know to be a day coat, but I always thought of it as a trench coat. So a long trench coat down to his ankles. And I immediately felt that that was my grandpa who had died 7 years previously. He was my dad's father. And he was probably about 20 meters away, I want to say, in front of me. And I couldn't make out his face, but I could feel his presence. And I just felt like, oh, that's my grandpa. And so we had just an inaudible conversation, like a telepathic communication. And from what I remember, even though I know that he said more and that we spoke about more, but I remember him saying that everything is going to be okay. You just need to keep going. And what I was interpreting that he meant by that was that I wasn't going to die from the leukemia, that I was um, going to be okay. I was going to make it through it, but that I couldn't give up, that I had to keep going. And so we had that conversation, and then, a bit more was said. I just can't remember. My mind can't grasp what was said, I don't think. And then, um, yeah, almost as soon as it really felt like I was in that space for an eternity. It felt like I was um, probably there for 1,000 years. It just seemed so peaceful and so, I don't know, it just seemed like that was where I belonged. I don't know. And and then all of a sudden, kind of without warning, I was just sucked back, and it felt like I was being sucked through a tube. And then all of a sudden, I was in my body, and I was hearing my dad's voice saying, "Zach, Zach, are you okay? Are you okay? Are you all right? Is everything okay?" And then I heard another man's voice say, "Do you want me to call 911? Is he okay? Do you want me to call 911?" And my dad kept saying, "No, no, he's okay." And I couldn't move my body, which was weird, but I was able to say, "I can hear you. I just can't move my body." And then, um, yeah, probably about a minute or two it took for my nerve endings and my body to start tingling again. And then I was able to open my eyes and move my body. And I got up, and the man that was there was a man that had just run across the street and had seen me fall. And my dad had actually sprinted through this parking lot that 40 meters away and caught me before I had hit the ground. So at that time, I didn't, I thought I was only 14, and I was really dealing with, going through all that cancer treatment, all the chemotherapy and all those medications. So it did what I think it did, um, was it opened something in my mind, or it opened a channel for me that allowed me to hear more of a guidance, I want to say, like a spiritual guidance, almost, I guess you could say, the voice of the divine, or angels, or whatever you want to call it, lost loved ones. But I could hear guidance of from them when I was in, because I had, from that moment on, I had another 8 months of very intense chemotherapy, so it wasn't over with, and it was more difficult. It kept getting more and more difficult. But for me, that opened a channel to where I could hear that guidance, to know that in those moments of fear, in those moments of worry and concern, that as long as I listened to that guidance and took action based upon that guidance, that I was going to be okay, and that it would make the journey of being a human being a bit more fun. Um, and then that was kind of a stepping stone, maybe a catalyst to then delving deeper, because 2 years after that I ended up relapsing. So I got leukemia a second time, and that second time I was experiencing more children, because it was a children's hospital. And so I was experiencing more children that were sick, and from anywhere from the age of 2 all the way to 16, like I was, and 17, and seeing their parents suffering, and them suffering, and their siblings suffering. And that um, experience furthered my questioning as to why these things happen in life. Then when I started asking those questions, I started getting answers, and I started getting more experiences. Like the very first time I meditated consciously, I was 19. All of a sudden, I took a big breath in, and I went, and then I took another big breath in, and I wasn't doing this on purpose. It was just happening. I took a big breath in, and all of a sudden I expanded, and I felt as if I was as big as my house. And then I exhaled, and I took another inhale, and I expanded to the whole city, and I exhaled, and I became inhaled, and I became the whole state, and I exhaled, and then I became the whole earth, and then I exhaled, and I became the whole galaxy, and I exhaled, and I became the whole universe, and I exhaled, and then all of a sudden, my breath normalized. And I was sitting there in the middle of the universe, what it felt like, and I could feel myself extend outward as everything and nothing at all. And so that was my very first time to meditate when I was 19. And when I had that experience, and then, well, and then I kind of existed like that and was just feeling myself flowing in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of everything. And then I heard this faint beeping, beep, beep, beep. And I thought, oh my gosh, my body is still in my parents' house. And so just how I expanded, I started to retract back in. So I came back into my body and I couldn't move my body again. I was numb for 10 minutes and I was just sitting there kind of freaking out, panicking, going, is my body going to come back on? And all of a sudden I started feeling sensation in my fingertips, and my nose, my cheeks, my toes. And then after I had that experience, I went, holy crap, what was that? And that experience really threw me on a, like, it validated that out of body near death experience I had where I saw my grandpa. But it really made me think, okay, I can almost consciously do this if I just let go. If I let go and trust that everything's going to be okay, my mind will expand and my body will expand. So then I just started seeking out more and more and more information on what just happened to me and what happened to me 5 years prior. And I just kept getting more and more and more answers. And then when I get these answers, I test them out, and I would get uh, uh, a mirroring. I would get an experience that matched what I was thinking, and so that just changed me from going being a religious person, which I never really was, to a very spiritual person, which I didn't need the religious text, things like that, to help me um, understand that this life is quite a gift, but in the end, it is just a game. It's a play. It's momentary. It doesn't. It's not forever. And the suffering that we experience is necessary for our spiritual growth. Your suffering has made you stronger. Your suffering has made you understand, right? Every time you were sick, you wanted more wellness and you appreciated when you were well. Every time you were lonely and it caused you to recognize how much you enjoy company with others, good friends, good family, a partnership, and all those things in life that seem to be so difficult and hard and overwhelming. If you can find the gratitude in that they are showing you what you do want, they're the guidepost, right? It's the guidepost. If this is the bad situation, it's pointing the way to what you do want. Like, hey, this is a bad situation, but it's saying, Eric, go that way. Saying, hey, your desire, your what you're wanting is that direction. And I would say everyone is on this journey together. And even if people are doing very, very, very bad things to other people, to do your best to love them. I'm not a religious person, but as you can imagine, I find myself to be deeply spiritual. And I like the quote by, well, it's in the Bible by Jesus, and he says, "One final commandment I give to you, and that is that you love each other as I have loved you." And I think that's something that I learned from this experience, was that in the end, we're all going to that place, that beautiful tunnel of joy, of love, of peace. We're all going to end up there, regardless of who you think you are in this life. You're going to go there. And so if that's the place you're going to go, why not try to embody it while you're here? And that's a conscious practice. That's a practice when things are going bad. You go, all right, this is going bad. I'm experiencing it. I'm going to allow myself to feel the emotions that are arising from it. And then I'm going to thank it and say, thank you for showing me the direction that I now want to focus, meaning, where do I want to put my attention? Do I keep complaining about how sick I am, or how poor I am, or how lonely I am? Or do I say thank you for that? And do I then focus on letting the universe, letting the divine gift me the health, the wealth, the person, whatever it is that every individual has that guidance within them, but it requires stillness and silence to hear those um, if for the better word, those words or that guidance. And I think guidance comes in many forms. So the guidance could come in the form of you and I having a conversation with somebody who's poor. You could be the messenger from the divine for them, saying, oh, well, this is, if you want to become wealthier, you're obviously going to have to work, or you're going to have to feel yourself worthy. You're going to have to feel yourself wealthy. And then you may come as a teacher in the form of the divine and give them the information they're seeking. Or they may watch a video on YouTube and they get the information they're seeking. Or they may watch a movie or read a book or be told to read a book. Or they may hear something in their own ear saying, hey, you should do this, you should do that. But I don't think anyone is missing their guide. I don't think anyone is disconnected completely from their guidance, meaning like if you plug it in, they're always going to plug in. But I think many people can, God, kind of pull out their cord, so they're just hanging out right there, where all they have to do is kind of, push that cord into the we'll say the into the outlet, and put it in an outlet. They're just pulling themselves out, and they're doing that by virtue of their own thoughts, their own words, and their own actions. So when you connect, and I think that's why meditation is so important, because that stillness inside stills that inner voice that sometimes can be detrimental. And so when meditation, or in a practice that, Tai Chi or Qigong or yoga, or something that helps us running, something that helps us still the mind, eventually that voice, that stream of well-being, right, Eric? There's My belief is that there is a stream of well-being, a stream of goodness, that an energy that flows in every human being. And the only reason that we don't remain healthy, we don't remain happy, we don't remain joyful, is because we are thinking thoughts that are not in alignment with that stream of well-being. Each and every individual soul is good, and that the human being in their mind and in their body can disconnect from that. And that is when we get illness, and that is when we get poverty, and that is when we get loneliness and negative emotion. So finding a way to just think thoughts, and it just comes with thoughts because I could say, Eric, you're such a handsome young man. You're very kind, you have a great smile, right? And that makes you feel good. To me, that's alignment with your soul. I'm telling you something that your soul already knows, and so you're in alignment and you feel good, you're connected. But when I say, Eric, you don't seem like a very nice person, you seem pretty mean, pretty harsh, that feels bad, and then that's me just pulling that apart. But it's ultimately you acknowledging the thought that I am sending you through my word.